Good afternoon. Apologies, a couple of minutes late. Was actually exchanging messages with Pete Godsey. Looking forward to this Saturday when Pete will be back on with me for another discussion. And he's been sending me some nice videos of the snow that's been falling in Two Rivers. One day it was about an inch. A couple of days later, it was about 6 inches, and it was very, very cold. I think around about -10, or I think it's about 19. Did he say? I think it's around about the same sort of figure. But anyway, below freezing, which it was here quite a bit. It has been quite a bit. As you know, on Christmas Day, we did part 1 of this review of Richard Leo's book. There's another message from Pete. Just send him a thumbs up. We looked at part 1 of this review by none other than Mark Godsey, a review of Richard Leo's book. And so here is part 2. Let's just jump straight in, shall we? I think we're all set up, ready to go. So if I just click on, just make sure everything is going as it should do. You know me, always I'm going to make sure that everything is as it should be. Yeah, seems to be okay. Okay, let's pop this up. So we left off at this section B, police interrogations in the real world, yesterday and today. And here we've got hi Darkside and Linda, nice to see you. So yeah, just in case you missed, so I was a couple of minutes late. Been busy exchanging messages with Pete Godsey, who's looking forward to coming on Saturday, and I know that he's always got a date with the ladies on the Friday. So between Linda, myself, and Becky, we keep him nice and busy. Wow, that's nice. Sorry, I've got a Lafroig on the go. Delicious. Anyway, as I say, we got up as far as this section B, police interrogations in the real world, yesterday and today. Number 1, exchanging the nightstick for the polygraph machine. Now, chapters 2 through 5 of Richard's book describe the evolution of the real world interrogation process in the past century. Richard asserts that an historical understanding of the evolution of interrogation process is necessary to an understanding of police attitudes towards interrogation today. Now, obviously, we all know that, as Mark Hodder posted just today in the Facebook group, we know that, Wiegert and Fassbender's interrogation of Brendan, is now looked upon as being a great example of what not to do. A little bit like apparently in the hotel trade, they used to train up new hotel workers by showing them episodes of Fawlty Towers. This is not how you treat guests. It's quite clear that the way that Wiegert and Fassbender interviewed Brendan is not what you should do, but it's what they've been getting away with for so long. And don't you think it also beggars belief that the courts and the judges allow this to happen? When you've got people like Judge David Hamilton saying that, Brendan was gently nudged into giving his confession. Anyway, let's carry on. As he says, it's really important to understand the evolution of interrogation process. Now, Chapter 2 is dedicated to the third degree, which describes the physically brutal interrogation techniques frequently employed by detectives to coerce confessions from suspects prior to the Supreme Court's 1936 decision in Brown versus Mississippi. And I must admit, when I got to this chapter, some of you won't know me quite well. I was interested to note that the term, the third degree, Richard actually mentions in the book, the term third degree is believed to have derived, shall we say, from Freemasonry. I find that particularly interesting. I would certainly not dispute Richard Leo's suggestion. Let's put it that way. The torturous interrogation tactics utilized in this era, let's come on down, have been adequately described in prior publications and even in popular media and need not to be recounted in great detail here. And they aren't recounted in great detail in Richard's book. But Richard states that the use of the third degree waned after Brown through the 1940s, dissipated even more during the 1950s, and then became rare to non-existent by the 1960s. Acknowledging our country's unfortunate history of interrogation practices is important, however, because Richard contends that many aspects of modern interrogation practices evolved from the third degree. The Wickersham Report, which you've heard me mention before, the Brown decision, and later Miranda versus Arizona, forced detectives to alter interrogation strategies from physical torture to psychological coercion. But many vestiges of the third degree remain, specifically the basic values and goals embraced by detectives in the interrogation room remain fixed in a third degree mentality. Namely, the suspect subjected to interrogation is always guilty. He will lie about his guilt, and the detective must use whatever means and tricks he can legally get away with to obtain not just a confession, but an orchestrated narrative that will guarantee a conviction. This Lefroy, as I say, is particularly nice. It was, of course, a Christmas present. One of the best kind of Christmas presents you can get, I'm sure you'll agree. A Mimi. To me, from me. The basic goal of interrogation is the same as it was a century ago. Convince the suspect that he has no option but to confess, and that it is in his self-interest to do so. Richard notes that this mentality is at odds with our constitutional requirement that confessions be voluntary to be admissible in court. The police's insistence on secrecy and keeping the public and courts in the dark about what occurs in the interrogation room is another attitude that was burned into police culture in the era of the third degree, and to which police departments continue to cling today. The third degree era taught police departments that the easiest and most expedient way to investigate a case was to coerce a confession from a suspect at the front end of the investigation. In a sense, it made police investigators lazy, hampered the development of their broader investigative skills, and fostered the habit of leaning on the home run confession to clear their crowded case dockets. Richard asserts that this over-reliance on confessions learned during the earlier era, remains a hallmark of police interrogation today. This is a quote. The decline of the third degree is also a story about the persistence of police institutions and behavior. For the structure of early American interrogations remains largely intact to this day, even if the content has changed. As in the era of the third degree, the primary goal of police interrogations is not to elicit the truth per se, but to incriminate the suspect in order to build a case against him and assist the prosecution in convicting him. And interrogation still often occurs in secrecy. Contemporary American police have skillfully adapted to the norms of the adversary system, but like their predecessors, they do not aspire to be impartial fact finders. Rather, they are still essentially agents of the prosecution, and they also continue to exercise a virtual monopoly of power at the front end of the criminal legal system, manipulating suspects to provide damning testimonial evidence against themselves before any of the adversary's system's checks and balances can be meaningfully applied. The seeds of modern interrogation were sown in the era of the third degree, and they have left an indelible, if largely hidden, imprint on contemporary police methods. Now, before turning to his depiction of modern interrogations, Richard pauses in Chapter 3 to describe the emergence of new interrogation weapons developed by police departments to secure confessions without physical violence. Leo asserts, in short, that police interrogators have traded the nightstick and billy club for pseudo-scientific lie detection devices. Indeed, the police now employ lie detection techniques as a means of coercion confessions. They do so by routinely coaxing the suspect under interrogation into taking a polygraph so, quote, we can close the case and let you go. They then invariably inform the suspect that he has failed the polygraph, even if he actually passed. Supported by the aura of scientific proof of guilt, a suspect told he has failed the polygraph often comes to believe that he must be lying and simply does not remember committing the crime, or, as the interrogator is eager to verify, that all hope is lost. No one will now believe his innocence, and that confessing to obtain the implied mitigation in punishment is the only rational option. I think that's quite important, yeah, that confessing or agreeing to what they've said, because it's it's the only way that you're going to get a slightly better punishment. The only rational option. Richard cites studies showing that polygraphs and the like are accurate no more than 60 to 75% of the time, sometimes not even as much as that. Excuse me. Even more troubling is the fact that, when inaccurate, they are more likely to classify a truthful suspect as a liar rather than a lying suspect as truthful. Furthermore, behavior analysis, which we looked at, reading the suspect's non-verbal cues and then classifying him as truthful or untruthful, is even more unreliable and prone to error. And indeed, we looked at exactly those pages, 98 and 99, yesterday. And worse still, police interrogators often receive just a day or two of training in demeanor evidence and leave convinced that they can see through lying suspects, when studies suggest that even an expert well trained in such techniques has mastered a science that has no verifiable reliability. Now, as a result, of police training manuals and interrogation seminars, police officers possess a deep belief in the oracle-like status of the polygraph and other lie detection methods. Richard argues that the contemporary reliance on these sham techniques for divining truth is no better than trial by ordeal in ancient societies. Apparently, however, the polygraph alone was not an adequate substitute for the third degree. Police reformers also turned to the field of psychology, which, like the polygraph, carried the symbolism and authority of modern science. From these related arenas, the house of modern psychological interrogation was built. Today, interrogation is comprised of two elements: the studied detection of deception and the use of psychologically manipulative methods. Chapter 2. Modern Interrogation. Modern interrogation techniques, Richard contends, are seeped in fraud, manipulation, and deception. Police have developed fraud-based interrogation techniques because they assume that every suspect under interrogation is guilty and needs some coercion and trickery to come clean, and because the police view themselves as agents of the prosecution and thus the suspect's adversary. Fraud and psychological coercion are present in all four stages of modern interrogation outlined by Leo. There is the softening up phase, the Miranda warning phase, the interrogation proper, and then the post-admission phase. The softening up stage comes first. And you can't help reading this and see Brendan. The goal of this stage is to disarm the suspect by making him believe that the police simply need to ask him a few questions to help them solve the crime. The encounter is called an interview rather than an interrogation. The subject is typically told either that he is not a suspect or that the police just need a few minutes of his time so that they can check him off the suspect list. Hidden from the suspect is the fact that the interrogators have prejudged his guilt, that he is about to be intensely interrogated, and that the sole goal of the interrogations is not to find the truth, but is simply to obtain a confession for the prosecution. The first step is to establish a rapport with the suspect. Police will often flatter or ingratiate themselves with the suspect to create an appearance of a non-adversarial relationship. One detective explained the goal of this stage to Richard as follows. I don't care whether it is a rape, a robbery, or a homicide. The first thing you need to do is build rapport with that person. I think from that point on, you can get anybody to talk about anything. In short, police interrogation is the first and perhaps most adversarial part of the adversary system, but the softening up stage is designed to turn that truth on its head. Now, after the police have convinced the suspect that the person of the interview is non-adversarial and built a rapport with him, the next stage is to move the suspect past the Miranda warnings while convincing him that he need not invoke any of his rights. Richard contends that police have developed multiple strategies to avoid, circumvent, and nullify Miranda, and indeed work Miranda to their advantage. One way that detectives avoid Miranda is to falsely tell the suspect that he is not in custody and that he is free to leave at any time. Because Miranda warnings are only required when the suspect is in custody, police will invite the suspect to the station for an interview and inform him that you're here on a voluntary basis. You elected to come in here on your own, and I appreciate that, okay? And I told you on the phone I had no intention of arresting you. The officer's true intention, interrogating the suspect until he confesses and then placing him under arrest, is, of course, never revealed. Another way police interrogators frequently attempt to avoid Miranda is simply to read the suspect his rights and then move straight into the questioning without giving the suspect a chance to absorb the warnings or invoke them. If the softening up stage has been executed properly, a suspect will feel it is unnecessary or inappropriate to invoke his rights. If the suspect begins answering the officer's questions, as they typically do, courts will hold that he has implicitly waived his rights. Police interrogators increase the chances that the suspect will not invoke his rights by minimizing, downplaying, and de-emphasizing the importance of the warnings. The goal is to convince the suspect that the Miranda warnings waiver procedure is akin to standard bureaucratic forms that one signs without reading or giving much thought to. The softening up stage, which precedes the warnings, is important here because it establishes a norm of friendly reciprocation and the expectation that the suspect will comply. Police interrogators further de-emphasize the warnings by reading them in a perfunctory tone and bureaucratic manner. They do so without pausing or making eye contact with the suspect, or while implying that the warnings are merely a matter of routine and that it is a foregone conclusion that the suspect will waive them. In some instances, the interrogator will expressly inform the suspect that the warnings are an unimportant formality that needs to quickly be dispensed with so that the police can interview him and check him off the suspect list. In other cases, interrogators will persuade the suspect that he must waive Miranda and talk because it will be his only chance to tell his side of the story, and get the matter cleared up quickly. Richard contends, if the Supreme Court in Miranda sought to level the playing field by having detectives notify the suspect that they are his adversary and that the suspect's best interests may not be served by making statements that will be used against him, then the strategies that American interrogations use to obtain signed waivers have, in effect, turned Miranda on its head. Miranda is often little more than a continuation of the softening up phase of the interrogation. As in other stages, the detective's strategy is to create the illusion that he and the suspect share the same interest and that compliance is to the suspect's advantage. After the Miranda warnings, the interrogator may ask the suspect a few questions, but then quickly moves on to the third stage. At this stage, the focus changes from asking the suspect questions to telling him the answers and imploring him to confess, or telling him the answers and just getting Brendan to nod and say yes. The aim of the third stage is to move the suspect from denial to admission. At the base of every interrogation is the same message. the suspect stands to receive intangible or tangible benefits and avoid harms in exchange for an admission, ideally a full confession, to some version of the offence. His confession is quid pro quo for an end to the interrogation and avoidance of the worst case scenario, harsher treatment or punishment. Police interrogators induce suspects to confess by introducing negative incentives and offering positive incentives. Negative incentives break down the suspect's resistance, reverse his denials, lower his self-confidence, and induce feelings of resignation, distress, despair, fear, and powerlessness. After the suspect is broken down, positive incentives are offered to motivate him to see the act of complying and admitting to some version of the offence as his best available exit strategy and option, given his limited range of choices and their likely outcomes. The Los Angeles Police Department's interrogation training manual captures this strategy by encouraging detectives to tell suspects, "You did it. We know you did it. We have overwhelming evidence to prove you did it. We're getting fast, Brendan. We already know what happened, Brendan. We just need you to tell us. But the reason makes a difference. So why don't you tell me about it?" Common negative incentives include harsh accusations that the suspect committed the crime and accusations that he is lying. These accusations are repeatedly made. The suspect's denials are cut off and attacked with further and repeated accusations. Repeated accusations exert psychological pressure on the suspect and shift the burden of proof. Suspects rarely understand that the prosecution has the burden of proving the case against them. The message instead is that the interrogation will not end until the suspect convinces the police of his innocence or confesses. Because the police make clear that they do not believe that he is innocent, and never will, the only option to end the interrogation becomes a confession. Police interrogators strengthen their position at this stage by using false evidence ploys. Evidence ploys are used to convince the suspect that he has no choice but to confess. These tricks include falsely telling the suspect that an eyewitness saw him commit the crime, that his fingerprints have been found on the murder weapon, that his crime was caught on tape by a hidden video camera, or that his DNA was found on the victim's body. Because suspects rarely understand that the police can lie to them during an interrogation, they begin to see their position as hopeless. At this point, polygraphs and other forms of lie detection are typically brought into the picture. Suspects are told, "It's 100% accurate. There's no fault in it." Suspects are then invariably told that they failed the polygraph. This ploy is intended to break down a suspect's resistance by persuading him that he has been exposed, that his denials are futile, and that there is no escape from the necessity of admitting guilt. This process of accusations, attacking denials, and using false evidence ploys is repeated over and over, often combined with raised voices, screaming, and relentless badgering. As one suspect recounted to Richard, "They just kept on and on, hounding and hounding and hounding. Finally I said yes, so they just leave me alone. I don't even know what they said. I tried to repeat what they said. I tried to ask them, I don't know what you're talking about. I was just tired. It was just like arguing with her. Finally, they told me I was done. I thought I was going to go home. I didn't go home. It was just like a big dream, just like something that just never happened. I was so tired. It was like being so confused." How are we doing? After a suspect is convinced that no one will ever believe his claims of innocence and that his situation is hopeless. Interrogators dangle some positive incentives. The basic idea of positive incentives is simple. He will receive less punishment or some form of police, prosecutorial, or juror leniency if he confesses, but he will receive greater punishment if he does not. Combined with this incentive is a warning that this is the suspect's only chance to receive mitigation. It is your opportunity to present your side of the story before it is too late. A common phrase uttered by interrogators is, "For me to help you, I need to hear your side of the story. I need to understand what happened." After the suspect breaks down and makes an admission, "Okay, I'll tell you what you want to hear. I did it." The final stage of interrogation begins. This post-admission stage involves the construction of a narrative. Richard describes this stage not as the confession-taking stage, but the confession-making stage. He asserts that if the suspect's details do not match the interrogator's version of the crime, the detectives will remain adversarial and combative and will repeat many of the negative and positive incentives introduced in the pre-admission stage. The post-admission narrative is not a document in which the interrogator simply acts as a stenographer. Rather, it is actively shaped and manipulated, with the suspect's participation to be sure, but at the interrogator's direction. If the suspect's narrative does not fit the detective's expectations, the interrogation continues with facts often supplied by the detective until the suspect and detective have a meeting of the minds on all important details. The detective's goal is to obtain a story that not only fits his conception of the crime, but that will be believable and dramatic in court, thus guaranteeing a conviction. The 5 things good interrogators try to obtain in the last stage are: 1. A coherent and convincing script. 2. A description of the suspect's motives and explanations. 3. A display of knowledge of the crime's intimate details that would only be known by the true perpetrator. 4. A description of what the suspect was feeling at crucial moments. And 5. A strong acknowledgement that the confession is voluntary. Richard states that these 5 goals are obtained through intense pressure. Detectives often suggest emotions and motives for the suspect to adopt. They might, through their questioning and badgering, reveal non-public facts about the case that the suspect understands he is supposed to incorporate into his narrative. A trick used by interrogators to make the confession appear more reliable is, after the narrative is complete, to personally write it out by hand while intentionally inserting errors on trivial facts. The interrogator will then ask the suspect to review the confession and correct any errors by replacing incorrect facts with correct ones, and to initial each change. In court, the marked-up confession, replete with corrections by the suspect, gives the appearance of a defendant who was in full control in the interrogation room and directing even the intimate details of the confession with confidence. I think that's a good place to stop just there. Heavy going, but very, very interesting stuff. I'm sure you'll agree. The lady who lives here that makes lots of noise in the kitchen has just arrived back home, and I'm sure that she'll be wanting me to stop what I'm doing and go and do some sort of housework, chores of some description. I'm sure I'm not the only husband that suffers these grotesque happenings. But anyway, no, it's 5 o'clock. That's 30 odd minutes of going through that particular part 2 So, as I say, maybe tomorrow I'll get part 3 done. We'll get something done anyway. We'll see you all again soon. Thank you for tuning in. Let's see who's all here. Linda, Darkside, Sean, hi there. T1, enjoying your spanner, I hope. Paul, JD, hi there. Nice to see you all here. Not bad verbiage. Paul, Sean, Lil Bob, how you doing? Nice to see you here. Linda, JD, Linda, Sean, JD, Darkside. I don't recall. I don't recall. Yep. Nice to see you here. Sean and Linda, Sean and Darkside. Okay. I think we've given everybody a shout out. So, listen, we'll catch you all again soon. Bye for now. I see I've got another couple of messages from Pete, so I better go and attend to those as well. Catch you all soon. Bye for now.